Great, yeah, hey, jump up on my back and relax the whole way.
Wow, really?
No.
Dudes? It's your boy Asian Psycho, aka ToeSniper98. Welcome back to yet another double feature. Hope y'all watch Cheeky Breeky's How To first. If not, go watch it after you finish watching this one. And go stock up on some more Beluga or Stroysky or whatever your favorite vodka brand is while you're at it. You might as well, if only to pour one out for all those Saint Quarts you just burned on GoS rerun banner trying to get waiver and failing miserably again for the 4th time in a row. Today we're also going to take a look at Anastasia's self-proclaimed dad, who's about 400 years older than she is, Ivan.
You say what? When hold pistol like me, you shall never shoot the inoculum.
And let's be thankful that there haven't been any dojins of those two that involve the ugly bastard and bestiality tags, because it's bad enough that people love memeing the fuck out of K-Doc with NTR jokes. FGO's resident Fluffy the Terrible Trope is a 5-star rider who debuted with Lost Belt 1's second banner. He's a highly underrated primary DPS who's surprisingly flexible and can fulfill just about any role that DPS riders can provide, who unfortunately doesn't get discussed often, mainly because of the fact that he looks like he's straight out of a Souls game as one of the bosses you fight, and transplanted into another game where waifus and meta memers reign supreme. As a king himself, Ivan is not amused. Unless you give him Merlin. Your boy Ivan's also had it rough, because if you think about it, you spent most of Lost Belt 1 running around with a rebel movement that was dissatisfied with Imperial rule, spreading manifestos like your last name's Marx to make the proletarians of Yaga Russia rise up against the Tsar, and plotting to assassinate Anastasia and her family, which in this case is some crackhead who always looks like he's just gotten done doing 3 lines of coke, and whose name sounds like a knockoff camera brand. Welcome to the new Russia, indeed. Let's start with the basics. Ivan the Formidable has a very good 11.6k attack rating, but a pretty subpar HP rating of 13.2k. Not even Formidable's thickness can help out Ivan in a different game, despite the fact that they're both. He's got your typical balanced DPS deck or a near automata deck, because I know you degenerates can't get enough of 2B's ass. His hit counts are pretty significant here, because while his MP gen stat is a bit lower than average at 0.62%, he has 3 hit arts cards to help counterbalance that, and his quick card and extra attack both hit 4 times, which help him be able to Stargent a bit more comfortably on his own, especially given what his second skill is. His first skill removes his own debuffs and increases his MP gen rate by 30 to 50% for 3 turns on a 7 to 5 turn cooldown. A pretty straightforward skill, but its implications are huge because this gives Ivan much better MP gen than what his stats and card deck suggest. And let's not forget about the fact that most MP gen rate buffs in the game don't have 50% efficacies. Waifu Padoru and BTS Reject are 2 of the few who do have 50% MP generation rate buffs as well, or something close to that, and while they're targetable, Ivan's is on a 5-turn cooldown, whereas theirs is on 7. And when you factor in his star weight as a rider, his MP gen just goes through the damn roof once he starts hitting arts crits. So even though this skill doesn't directly buff Ivan's damage, it's such a huge indirect buff to it that it's just 1 or 2 steps removed from outright having a battery skill. And that's on top of being able to debuff cleanse himself and not have to rely on teammates for it. His second skill generates between 5 to 10 crit stars every turn and increases his buster performance by 20 to 40%, both for 3 turns, on another 7 to 5 turn cooldown. Now we have the final piece of the puzzle, that is Akatsuki's MP generation game, because all that was missing was a way to acquire stars on his own. The fact that this skill isn't just a glorified instinct, but instead a 3-turn star gen, means that Ivan doesn't have to be just a 1-pump chump. I mean, he can't be. Look at the fucking size of this lad. Granted, it can only produce 10 stars at max, and because Ivan doesn't have a star weight buff of his own, he'll still be prone to losing some of those stars to his teammates. But you just need to provide a little bit more star gen to give him a better chance at collecting stars, like another servant with a star regen skill of their own, or a 20-30, so that way he can start and keep critting like the absolute unit that he is. And daily reminder that Annie Blonde is one of the best Mystic codes in the game. His buster buff is also insane. It might not seem like it at first because it's not quite the 50% mana burst that we're all used to seeing other servants having, but this bears repeating. Ivan has a 40% buster buff that lasts for 3 turns. Most color buffs that last for 3 turns like this only scale up to 30%. Bender is one of the few exceptions whose buster buff scales up to 35%, which is already pretty unusual on its own. Yeah, Nightingale and Cocksucker might have 3-turn 50% mana bursts, but they're fucking support servants. In Imperial Russia, you are the 3-turn mana burst. So having both the star regen and his buster buff last for 3 turns is very convenient because this allows Ivan a 3-turn window to make use of some thick boy buster crits, whether it be just 1 turn, 2 turns, or all 3 turns if your star generating and your face card RNG is godlike enough. And remember that his S1 is also a 3-turn MP gen buff with the same cooldown timer, so it is very intuitive to use them in conjunction because you don't have to worry about wasting one skill or the other, or at least nowhere near as much as you might have to with other servants and their skills. His 3rd skill grants him Invul, reduces all enemies attack by 10 to 20% for 3 turns, and removes all their buffs on an 8 to 6 turn cooldown. This is what I like to call his Tachanka skill. He hunkers down and asserts his dominance as a Lost Belt King that he wasn't able to during Lost Belt 1 proper because of a wannabe master, a girl he thought was his wife just because they have the same name, and a pathetic excuse for a priest. By doing so, he causes all the enemies before him to tremble and quake at the sight of his viral male visage. This causes them to strip themselves of all their own buffs, removes their ability to harm him for 1 turn, and reduces their ability to counterattack him or the other gangbangers that he's brought with him because they're in total awe at the size of his huge, pulsating, fat buster crit damage. What? Where did you think I was going with that? Basically, just look up one of Asanagi's pieces that involve 2 girls and a guy and you'll get the picture. Shitty degenerate memes aside, this skill is his hard defense skill and it's ideal for setups where you need someone with an AoE buff removal on a skill. This, in combination with the rest of his skill set, makes him a surprisingly potent endgame or even challenge quest rider despite the fact that he's AoE, because he's a heavily self-reliant rider who only really needs a little bit of help to get his game plan rolling and doesn't really need much maintenance beyond that. His passives are Magic Resist D, which gives him 12.5% debuff resist, and Riding EX, which increases his quick performance by 12%. Normally, I'd say that Riding is a useless passive on servants with only 1 quick card, but given that his quick card is 4 hits, at this point it's actually boosting his Stargent off that 1 quick card pretty noticeably, even if it's not going to be relevant most of the time. And as if his potential as a crit rider weren't enough, Zakayev's MP is an AoE buster that first increases his own MP damage by 30 to 70% for 1 turn, deals damage, and then reduces all enemies' buster resists by 20% for 3 turns. DW decided that somehow this wasn't strong enough, so they gave him an MP buff that increases the damage scaling and increases the buster resist debuff that it inflicts onto enemies afterwards. Really, the only thing you need to look at is his MP overcharge effect. Those of you who've been watching my videos for a while now should know that MP damage buffs are on the rarer side of things when it comes to self buffs, and Ivan's got it as his MP overcharge, meaning that he'll always have it every time he blows his load, and it's got similar scaling to Ku Alter's overcharge. Oh, sorry, did I say similar? Because it's the exact fucking same! With an overcharge effect this thick, this means that with all their own skills active, Ivan outdamages an MP2 Drake, or even an MP1 Drake with her own MP buff while he doesn't have his. So it is laughably easy to make him just puke damage all over the screen like he's just drank a bottle of Ipecac for the last piece of pie in the fridge. Dark Souls Boy is one of the most flexible primary DPS riders we have in NAFGO so far. He can farm thanks to his AoE MP, he can face card with his balanced deck, and he can crit because of his rider class and self-star gen skill. His farming capabilities might not be as easy to take advantage of as other writers who have charges of their own, like Drake, Dio, or Kills You in Spanish. But like Darius' shonen anime rival, because of his 2 massive buffs that are as big as each of his thunder thighs, he's a proper nuke rider who can handle waves of berserker or caster mobs that have a bit higher HP than what your account might not be able to otherwise. He's not quite as big of a nuke as Iskander is, but it's a small price to pay for being able to also handle fights that aren't just farming or general content. Along the same lines, his crit damage is just as terrifying. He's a natural buster crit meme thanks to his S2, giving him sustained buster damage that scales higher than usual for a buff of its type. And he can also use his crits to overclock his MP thanks to his S1 that also happens to get rid of any debuffs that he might have so that he can continue being a terrifying buster crit meme, which then means that he can keep NPing and keep blasting like he's Bruce Almighty. All this to say that Ivan is probably one of the biggest, literally, and most Chad riders we have in the game. and don't let his lack of a face stop you from thinking otherwise. Sure, he might not have anything in his kit that's especially unique, like Ozzy's buff success buff effect or any dedicated support skills outside of his star gen and AoE buff removal, but his combination of incredible damage output, MP gain, and bits of utility and sustain more than make up for his perceived lack of specialty, and whatever you want him to do, so long as it's not something that's clearly not part of his kit, he should be more than capable of doing. But there are a few things that he's missing that prevents him from truly going Ultra Instinct like he does in his Ascension stages. While he's got his own debuff clear for sustain, he can't heal himself, so patching him up whenever he starts taking hits in a prolonged fight might be something you'll need to provide, either with your Mystic Code or the right teammates. As such, your usual healing memers apply, like Mahou Shoujo Media Magica and Ilya's mom. Fluffy Tails is someone I'd usually hesitate to recommend to a servant with a 2A 2B deck and a Buster MP like him, but I can kinda see a mega team of Tamamo, Ivan, and Merlin working out because Tama's arts buff will stack hilariously well with Ivan's first skill and cause him to charge his MP to comical levels, and even more so with crits. And even though we won't see him for a bit longer, Straight Outta Bleach has an incredible kit that gives Ivan everything that he could possibly want short of actual damage buffs. Speaking of damage buffs, because Manny has his own Buster and MP damage buffs, all he really needs are either attack or crit damage buffs. Remember that Avril Lavigne Simulator and Evil Boomer both have double charismas that apply to Ivan, though you should admittedly use Maeve more as a setup support or hybrid support. Ivan also has a bit of synergy with Evil Boomer since his S2 at max rank can provide the stars that Old Man Morty needs to fuel his own battery, though Ivan might not appreciate a plebeian like him stealing his stars. Cheeky Breeky herself is not half bad as a support either. Her attack buff helps his buff stack better together, and its attack debuff stacks with Ivan's own attack debuff for a total of 40% for 3 turns, and best of all, if you use their NPs in tandem, not only will Anna provide a 20% defense debuff for her foster dad to capitalize on, but she'll also give his MP a free overcharge state for the 40% MP damage buff instead of the usual 30%. Not bad for someone who was ironically also planning to go full Lenin on his ass too. Thanks to his stat kit, Babe the Russian Ox can fit a wide range of DPS related CEs. For general or farming damage, Golden Sumo seems to be the logical choice for him, but if you can give him strong attack buffers, this opens him up to being able to carry Buster CEs instead, like LZO, Victor, First Sunrise, Aerial Drive, Partake, Sea of Stars, At Wish's End, or Demon King. If you have attack and buster buffs covered, you could even optimize Ivan's MP damage buffs even further instead, and give him HND, or even Black Grail if you're a frickin' lunatic. Ivan's also a possible demonic bodhisattva candidate because his MP overcharge effect is so good. Because of his natural avenue of being a crit rider, give him crit star weight CEs like At Wish's End that we mentioned earlier, Hot Sands, or Star of Camelot if you want to guarantee his stars, or crit damage CEs like HND, Starry Nights, Dress for Demons, or Tumbra, or even Knight's Pride if you're okay with the demerit. One CE that I've mentioned a few times before but don't talk about often enough is Art of Death. If you don't quite have the means to provide consistent star gen to Ivan for some reason, if you're not particularly concerned with turning him into a crit rider, or you don't have any of the other CEs that I mentioned, Art of Death is a perfect alternative for him because it gives him anti-humanoid damage, which is relevant against basically every servant enemy in the game, and it's classified under the same category of buffs as MP damage and crit damage, meaning that it stacks just as well as they do when paired with the usual attack buffs and color buffs. It's basically a permanent MP damage mod, but for your face cards instead, so that they can do even more damage against humanoid enemies. It's always been a good CE choice to have as a backup alternative, and it's especially good here on Ivan. His Bond CE grants the party a permanent 10% buster and MP damage buff. This creates a bit of a weird situation with Ivan, because if you have this, you could use him as sort of a hybrid DPS, because he does have a bit of team utility with the star gen, attack debuff, and AoE buff removal. If Ivan weren't a rider, so he wouldn't generally hog all his stars to himself, or most of them anyway, then I could see an argument for using his Bond CE as an actual support mechanic, but as he is, he's too much of a primary DPS to be taking his Bond CE to any fights that actually matter. In summary, Dumbo is a do-it-all, do-it-yourself rider whose biggest specialty is beating that ass so hard you call him daddy whether you like it or not. With the second highest AoE damage among all riders in the game behind only Iskander, who who himself is also a limited 5-star writer. Ivan can nuke, crit, and face card anything you need him to faster than you can say, in awe of the size of this lad, absolute unit. Well, maybe except assassins. But he can also take care of himself with an invul, an MP generation steroid, debuff clear, and restore regen, and provide a bit of extra utility like his AoE buff removal and attack debuff. And just like Anna, who's sick and tired of your stupid little NTR jokes, he's just about had enough with your dumb fucking Soviet Russia memes. He'd probably like listening to Turisas's cover of Rasputin though, given that he himself looks metal as fuck. And that's all you need to know about this absolute unit. Like I said in Anastasia's video, next how-to will be on Hisako. I don't think it'll be next week though, because I'll be working on another video instead. Thanks for watching. Stay safe, wash your fucking hands, and keep being the dirty little weebs that you are. Deuces.